the olden days, things came in cookbooks. And some of you may have, moms may have this cookbook in the house, or your grandma may have it, or even great grandma. This was Better Homes and Gardens cookbook. I tried to look at when it was printed, but it was printed probably in the 1950s. So this is a really old recipe, and it's called Biscuits Supreme. And you may not know this about me, but I used to enter food in the fairs, and you can get ribbons for food, and even kids can do that. Hopefully we'll have fairs again this summer. But my biscuits were #1. I got a blue ribbon every year for them. So this is an award-winning biscuit if you make them right. So some of you may think of biscuits just coming in that roll, you unwrap it, pop, and you get 5 biscuits you plop onto the plate. I can actually make these quicker than you're doing with those. And they're gonna be a lot better for you, and I think it's a lot better tasting. So what are you gonna need? You're gonna need some flour, some sugar, some salt, baking powder. You're gonna need some milk, some shortening, and an ingredient we haven't used yet. It's called cream of tartar. You'll need a measuring cup so that you'll be able to measure out some things, and a spatula so we can do the shortening, a nice bowl, and I figured this was fitting since we're doing an old recipe. If you remember this from one of my other recipes, this was my grandmother's bowl, and these were from the 1950s. So do your math on that to figure out how old these are. A fork, sounds kind of unusual. You're gonna want something to roll out your dough on. If you have a pastry mat, that's the best. I'm just using a large cutting board. You'll need a baking pan of some sort, and you'll need something to roll it out with. If you have a rolling pin, that's gonna be ideal. If you don't have a rolling pin, you can be creative and find something to roll it out with. This was my grandmother's rolling pin, so this is probably back from the 1950s as well, so it's a really old one. So the first thing we're gonna do is inside of our bowl, oops, my rolling pin's rolling away. We're gonna put 2 cups of flour, and I just have 1/3 a cup of measuring, so let's see if you can figure out how many I'm gonna need. If I need 2 cups, well, how many thirds are in 1 cup? Well, if you do 1/3 plus 1/3 plus 1/3, that makes a full cup. So if 3 of these thirds make a cup, we'll need 6 of these. So we're gonna shake out 6 of them. There's 1, 2, whoops, going over there, 3, 4, 5, 6. And you don't want to flatten down flour because that will press air into it, and we don't want that because our biscuits will be flat. We're going to talk about that later when we roll it out. So the 2 cups of that, we're going to put 4 teaspoons of baking powder. And again, we're leveling these off. So there's 1, 2, 3, 4. And 1/2 teaspoon of salt. And I don't always measure my salt out. I can kind of eye it. You might want to measure it out there, 1/2 teaspoon. All right. And then 1/2 teaspoon of cream of tartar. And this is a lot thicker than the other stuff was here. 1/2 teaspoon. And then 2 teaspoons of sugar. There's 1, 2. All right. And we're going to mix that all in together. Make sure you got it all mixed good. And the next thing is we're going to put our shortening in. And we're going to put 1/2 cup of shortening. I got this nifty thing here that I can line it up on here, and it pushes it out so I don't get the hands gooey. So the different types of fats you're using when you're cooking with things, it's either going to be an oil or a shortening or butter. So those are the three kinds of oils or fats that you'll see in recipes. And with shortening, you're going to really want to make sure that you're pushing it down so you're filling up all the space in your measuring cup. Otherwise, you may not be getting the accurate amount. So I'm looking as I'm twisting it around to make sure that it's truly filling every gap and it's not full of air bubbles or anything. And this you will want to level off. Put my lid back on there. And this nifty thing, just kind of push it in there. And we're going to do something called cutting in. Some of you may have a type of pastry blender. And if I don't have one, but if your parents have a pastry blender, it kind of has rounded little metal bars and you can push things down in it. I'm just using a fork because fork works just as good. And when you cut something in, that means you're just kind of pushing down and mixing it in with the flour. So we're just kind of pushing it all around in the flour. And they call this cutting in because you're kind of cutting across it. And we don't want lumps, so we're just going to keep cutting that all in so it's plenty of the shortening with the flour. And it's going to start resembling kind of little chunks. We just don't want real big chunks. And this takes a little bit of time because you want to get it all nice and mixed good. All right. And once you've got it, so it's kind of what we call coarse chunks because it's kind of larger size. You can see what it looks like there. Now we're going to add some milk. If you remember from the wacky cake, we made kind of a little well in the center. We're going to do the same thing, a little well or a little hole. And we're going to add 2/3 of a cup of milk. So I'm using my third cup here. There's 1/3 and 2/3. Not going to be quite one of these little lunch milks. And then the next step is we're going to be stirring around until the dough forms a large ball and it's following the fork around. So you're going to just keep mixing it around and really get in there because you don't want any of that powdery stuff to not be a solid ball of dough. And you'll know when it's done because it's going to start literally a big ball following your fork around. And just keep kind of pressing down and getting that all in there so you have no loose flour in there. And I'm almost done because I can see there's still a little bit of powder down in there. And I don't want any. I want it all mixed in really good. Whew, it's an arm workout. All right. Now, as I can see, it's formed a dough. There's no more flour pieces down in the bottom. And we're going to take just a little bit of flour and towards you. And we want it to be about 1/2 inch thick. So then we're going to press straight down. Don't use a cup. Some people like to use the bottom of a cup and do that. You're pushing air into your biscuits. So you're just going to cut and set your biscuits out around. And when you got the extra dough, you're just going to kind of squeeze it together a little bit and roll it out again. And I can get about 2 more in there. And I can probably get 1 more in here. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. Didn't quite hit 8 with mine. That's okay. This one's going to be a little different shade. Some people put butter on the top. You can brush it with a little bit of butter. It will make it kind of a toasty color on the top. You're going to put these in an oven at 450 degrees for 15 minutes. And these will be great for dinner time. You could even have these at Thanksgiving. You can even make breakfast sandwiches like they have at McDonald's. You could cut it in half, add an egg, bacon, sausage in there, cheese, so you can have a breakfast biscuit. Also, look at my notes of how to make your own butter, because that's going to be a fun thing. Happy cooking!